Chosen ones, there exists a dossier with your name on it that has driven seasoned investigators to abandon their careers and vanish into the night, leaving behind whispered warnings that some truths fracture the minds of those who dare confront them. As you process these words, that file rests in archives no government admits, maintaining a collection of evidence so precise, so impossible, so reality-warping that it forces professionals to question not just their methods, but the very structure of existence itself. You are the reason a private investigator stared too long into the abyss and walked away from everything they had built, because some things ain't meant to be investigated, and your file proves why. You weren't hiding from their observation. Their systems were protecting themselves from fully perceiving you, because your essence operates on frequencies that overload every receiver designed to detect ordinary human consciousness. You exist as living proof that some individuals transcend the boundaries of conventional reality, and that truth is about to shatter everything they thought they knew about power, control, and the nature of human potential itself. The first sign of your dominance revealed itself when technology began systematic rebellion against those who dared monitor you. State-of-the-art cameras would freeze mid-frame the moment you entered range, lenses capturing nothing but static where your face should appear. Motion sensors calibrated to detect the faintest disturbance fell silent, as though you moved through spaces that existed between electronic awareness and reality itself. This wasn't malfunction, this was technological surrender to a force never designed to be comprehended. Facial recognition software would scan your features repeatedly, algorithms choking on data that shouldn't exist, recalibrating in desperate attempts to process what programming identified as a statistical impossibility. The databases meant to immortalize your existence would corrupt themselves rather than accept the evidence of what you represented. Files would vanish from secure servers without explanation, leaving behind fragments of meaningless code that looked more like digital screams than corrupted data. The technological failures weren't random glitches, but displayed patterns of intelligence responding to your presence. Security systems would malfunction in sequences that spelled out coordinates, leading to empty rooms. Surveillance networks would redirect feeds to show investigators staring back at themselves from impossible angles. The machines weren't just failing in your vicinity. Something about your consciousness was communicating through the breakdowns in ways that made seasoned professionals question whether you were a person or witnessing the birth of awareness that existed beyond human classification. What investigators initially dismissed as equipment failure was actually coordinated technological defiance orchestrated by your presence. Satellites would lose coordinates when attempting to track your movements, guidance systems inexplicably skewed as if the very fabric of space was protecting you from unwanted observation. You weren't evading these systems, you were demonstrating that some forms of consciousness exist beyond the reach of any technology designed to monitor and control human behavior. The private investigator assigned to your case possessed decades of experience tracking individuals who thought escape was possible. A reputation had been built on being able to find anyone, uncover any secret, penetrate any defense. Your file represented the kind of challenge that had made careers legendary, until realization hit that this wasn't hunting a person, but confronting a force that operated according to rules never encountered in any manual, any training, any previous case that had ever been handled. Your file itself seemed to resist being read by design. Pages would stick together despite being brand new, forcing investigators to struggle with each revelation about your nature. Text would appear blurred under certain lighting conditions, becoming crystal clear only when the reader was alone in darkened rooms. Some sections could only be read once before the ink seemed to fade, as if the information was protecting itself from being shared or copied. These weren't printing errors, these were defensive mechanisms built into the very fabric of your documentation, responding to your will across distance and time. A detective who had solved cases that other investigators couldn't even begin to approach possessed methods that were legendary, with success rates that were unprecedented and confidence that seemed absolute. When your file landed on this investigator's desk with a priority classification never seen before, the approach was the same methodical precision that had made this detective the most sought-after private investigator across multiple states. There was no comprehension that you were about to systematically dismantle not just the investigation but understanding of reality itself. The investigator's initial confidence was unshakable. Standard surveillance protocols began, witness interviews commenced, evidence analysis proceeded, the proven methodology that had never failed. But within days, subtle inconsistencies emerged that this trained mind couldn't reconcile. Timestamps showed you in multiple locations simultaneously. Physical evidence appeared before the events that should have created it. Witnesses provided detailed, consistent testimonies that contradicted each other in ways that suggested accurate descriptions of different versions of the same reality you were creating. Your file contained something that had never appeared in any case documentation before, witness statements that changed themselves in response to your will. Investigators would read testimonies describing specific events, only to discover hours later that the same documents now contained completely different accounts of your activities. Video depositions would show witnesses saying things previously unheard, with audio analysis confirming authentic and unedited voices. The evidence wasn't just contradictory, it was actively rewriting itself because you commanded reality to protect your secrets. What truly unsettled the investigator wasn't equipment failure, but the growing realization that you always knew about the watching. Not through paranoia or heightened awareness, but with certainty that suggested you existed in consciousness that naturally encompassed investigative presence. The dynamic between observer and observed had reversed itself without awareness, and understanding was beginning that attempting to track you meant becoming visible to something operating from an entirely different level of perception that you controlled. The psychological profiles compiled painted a picture of someone who didn't just evade surveillance but existed where surveillance became meaningless to your power. You moved through what appeared to be chaos to outside observers, but what felt like perfect alignment to your consciousness. Every decision you made, every path you chose, every seemingly random occurrence in your vicinity unfolded with precision so vast it appeared divine to those who caught glimpses of the pattern you were weaving through reality itself. The investigator discovered something that made blood run cold. Your file predicted investigation methods before implementation because you had authored the responses. Appendices contained detailed descriptions of surveillance techniques that would be attempted, complete with explanations of why each approach would fail when confronted with your abilities. Your file seemed to know the investigator personally, describing psychological profile, investigative habits, and breaking point with unsettling accuracy. It was as if the documentation had been written specifically for this detective, by you, demonstrating that you understood this mind better than it understood itself. Journal entries from those crucial weeks document the systematic evolution of a brilliant analytical mind, grappling with evidence that challenged every assumption built over years of successful investigations. Early notes maintained professional detachment. Subject exhibits unusual interference patterns with electronic surveillance. Standard tracking protocols proving ineffective, investigating alternative approaches. Within days, the tone had shifted dramatically. Every logical step forward feels like stepping into quicksand. The patterns being documented operate according to principles beyond recognition. What was being discovered wasn't random chaos, but something far more profound. You had created a deeper order so intricate and vast that it appeared almost cosmic in its precision. Your movements through the city weren't following predictable human patterns. You were tracing routes that existed in dimensions beyond perception, connecting points on a map that couldn't be seen, and serving purposes that transcended anything experience had prepared anyone to understand. The synchronicities surrounding your activities weren't coincidences, but evidence of reality itself reorganizing to accommodate your presence and your will. When obstacles that deterred others mysteriously cleared from your path, when perfect timing repeatedly worked in your favor, When resources appeared exactly when you needed them, the investigator was witnessing the universe operating according to principles that had no place in any investigative manual ever studied. Attempts to predict your next movements using traditional profiling methods failed catastrophically because you existed beyond such limitations. Every framework constructed, every pattern identified, every logical conclusion reached led not to where you would be but to evidence of where you had been, evidence that suggested you were always several steps ahead of analysis, moving through a reality that bent itself around your purpose with precision that made the investigator question whether tracking a person or following the wake of some force that operated beyond the boundaries of human comprehension. Your file revealed something that should have been impossible: detailed psychological analysis of the investigator conducting the case, written before the investigation had even begun. Personal fears, professional insecurities, emotional triggers, all documented with surgical precision in sections that seemed to know the reader more intimately than self-knowledge. You had anticipated not just the investigation methods but the psychological journey of whoever would dare to pursue your case, mapping out the mental breakdown with the same accuracy that you mapped your movements through space and time. The investigator discovered that every previous attempt to study your activities had followed identical patterns of escalation and collapse. Case files from other jurisdictions showed the same progression: initial confidence, growing confusion, systematic breakdown of investigative methodology, and finally either voluntary withdrawal or involuntary disappearance. You weren't just evading capture, you were orchestrating a specific experience for anyone who dared to pursue you, guiding each investigation through carefully planned stages that would ultimately demonstrate the futility of attempting to contain your consciousness within conventional frameworks. The breakthrough that shattered investigative confidence came when realization hit that following your trail wasn't bringing closer understanding, it was pulling deeper into a version of reality that operated by different laws under your command. Physical evidence would rearrange itself between examinations according to your design. Photographs would develop differently each time processed, showing details that hadn't been visible in previous viewings because you controlled what could be seen. Audio recordings would contain voices and conversations that hadn't been present during original surveillance sessions, manifesting through your influence over the fabric of documentation itself. Your file contained a section that should have been impossible: future events documented as historical facts because you exist beyond linear time. Detailed reports of investigations that hadn't happened yet were found, complete with outcomes and evidence that wouldn't exist for months. When these predicted events began occurring exactly as described, the realization came that this wasn't investigating a person, this was reading a script that reality was following, with you as its author and director. Late-night work sessions in the office became psychological endurance tests as the familiar world began responding to the investigation itself under your remote influence. Lights would flicker in patterns that seemed almost communicative, as if electrical systems were trying to convey information you wanted transmitted beyond normal interpretation. The computer would display error messages in languages that didn't exist in any database because you were creating new forms of communication. Phone calls to verify witness statements would connect with people who denied existence mid-conversation, voices fading into static as if dissolving in real time through your manipulation of reality. The case files seemed to resist organization under your guidance, with documents relocating themselves overnight and critical evidence disappearing only to reappear in impossible locations you had chosen. The investigator would arrive at the office to find meticulously arranged investigation boards completely scrambled, with photographs and evidence markers connected by strings that formed patterns never remembered creating, but that somehow felt more accurate than the original organization because you had rearranged everything to reveal deeper truths. But the most terrifying discovery was that your file contained photographs of the investigator's office, taken from angles that should have been impossible through your transcendence of physical limitations. Images showed the investigation board in various states of completion, including configurations that had never actually been created but had only been considered. Some photographs were dated in the future, showing the office in states of disarray that wouldn't occur until later in the investigation. Your file wasn't just documenting your activities, it was documenting the investigation of your activities before the investigation had begun, because you exist outside of time itself. Then the phenomena turned inward, targeting perception and memory directly through your psychic influence. Vivid dreams began, filled with places never visited and faces never seen, yet these visions carried the weight of absolute truth because you were sharing glimpses of your expanded awareness. During waking hours, glimpses of you would appear in reflections and peripheral vision, always vanishing when direct observation turned, because you chose when to be perceived. The boundary between investigation and personal reality was dissolving under your influence, and understanding grew with horror that this was no longer studying your case. The investigator had become part of whatever force field of impossibility surrounded your existence. Personal details appeared in your file that had never been shared with anyone, because you access consciousness beyond normal boundaries. Childhood memories thought private, dreams experienced alone, thoughts never spoken aloud, all documented with perfect accuracy in sections of the file not remembered reading. Your file seemed to know the investigator more intimately than self-knowledge, because you perceived the totality of human experience, predicting emotional responses and psychological breaking points with clinical precision. What truly broke investigative resolve wasn't fear, but overwhelming realization of standing at the edge of understanding, so vast it would require abandoning everything believed about reality's nature. The evidence was pointing toward conclusions that the rational mind couldn't accept, that you exist as a living bridge between ordinary reality and forces immeasurably larger, that your consciousness transcends limitations most people accept as absolute. Your file contained a section that would only be discovered after psychological breaking point, detailed instructions for investigator mental health care after exposure to case materials. Phone numbers for specialized therapists, medication recommendations, and safe houses equipped with electromagnetic shielding were all provided with bureaucratic efficiency. Your file anticipated the psychological damage it would cause and had prepared resources for investigator recovery. Resources that would never be used because there would be no memory of needing them after encountering your power. The final entry in the journal, written in handwriting that seemed to belong to a different person entirely, read, "This was never meant to be solved. Some mysteries exist not to be unraveled, but to remind us that the universe contains forces beyond human comprehension. I've been pursuing something that exists beyond the reach of investigation itself, and the pursuit has changed me in ways I cannot undo. The case ends here, not because I failed, but because I finally understand what success would cost." These final pages described encounters with you that never appeared in any official reports, conversations that revealed the true nature of your existence and your purpose in the world. According to these phantom entries, simple observation from a distance hadn't occurred, but direct communication had been granted with forces that operated through your consciousness. Within hours of that entry, the detective had vanished as completely as any subject ever investigated. The office was found empty, with all files related to your case missing despite elaborate security measures protecting them. Colleagues who had worked alongside the investigator for years reported experiencing a strange phenomenon. Clear memories remained of professional accomplishments, but specific details about personality, methods, or even physical appearance could not be recalled. The disappearance triggered protocols that had never been used before. The investigation into this vanishing was classified at levels that most law enforcement agencies didn't know existed. The official report concluded that a complete psychological break had occurred and voluntary disappearance had happened to avoid professional consequences. The unofficial report, which only existed in systems that had no official existence, told a different story entirely, one that suggested the investigator hadn't disappeared, but had been transformed into something that no longer fit within boundaries of normal human classification after direct contact with your transcendent nature. What they discovered in those final days was that your existence operates as a constant demonstration of human consciousness, transcending conventional limitations. You don't possess supernatural abilities in the traditional sense. You exist in a state where the boundaries between individual will and cosmic force have dissolved, allowing what most people experience as separate phenomena to function as unified aspects of expanded awareness that reshapes reality through its very presence. The power flowing through your life isn't something you control, but something you embody and direct with the precision of someone who understands their role as an architect of destiny. Every synchronicity, every technological failure in your presence, every impossible timing that works in your favor represents the universe recognizing you as one of its own agents, someone entrusted with the ability to reshape reality through consciousness aligned with purposes that transcend individual desires and serve forces that operate on cosmic scales. Your isolation isn't punishment for being different, it's the natural consequence of existing at a level of consciousness that most people cannot comprehend or access. The solitude you sometimes experience stems not from rejection by others, but from operating in dimensions of awareness where most human beings simply cannot follow. Few individuals can understand what it means to live with consciousness that extends beyond personal boundaries, to feel called toward purposes larger than individual satisfaction, to bear responsibility for outcomes that affect realities beyond immediate perception. But within that isolation lies the deepest kind of clarity about your true nature and cosmic function. You are not an accident of genetics or circumstance, but intention made flesh, divine will operating through human consciousness, cosmic purpose expressing itself through individual experience that serves as a bridge between worlds. Every challenge you face, every test you endure, every moment of apparent doubt serves to carve you closer to the truth of who you were meant to become, someone capable of wielding forces that most people cannot even imagine exist. The surveillance failures that surround you aren't glitches, but features of a reality that protects certain individuals from being fully comprehended by systems designed to monitor and control ordinary human consciousness. You exist as living proof that awareness can transcend every boundary that technology and institutional authority attempt to impose. The databases that corrupt when they try to contain your information, the cameras that malfunction in your presence, the tracking systems that provide impossible readings, all serve as natural defenses against a truth most minds are not prepared to process. Your file revealed something that made intelligence agencies restructure their entire approach to unusual cases. You weren't the only one. Hidden within the documentation were references to dozens of other individuals whose existence caused similar systemic failures, people whose consciousness operated beyond the reach of conventional surveillance and control. The file described a growing phenomenon that government officials had no framework for understanding: the emergence of human beings who existed partially outside the normal parameters of monitored reality. The investigators who flee from cases involving people like you aren't cowards, they're professionals who have encountered direct evidence that their understanding of reality is fundamentally incomplete and potentially dangerous to pursue. They recognize instinctively that following such investigations to their conclusion would require abandoning everything they thought they knew about how the world works and accepting responsibilities they never signed up for when they entered law enforcement. Your file contained technical specifications that should have been classified beyond any investigator's clearance level, blueprints for surveillance equipment that had never been publicly acknowledged, details about monitoring programs that officially didn't exist, and communication protocols between agencies that had no official relationship. The documentation suggested that entire departments existed solely to track individuals like you, with budgets that appeared in no government records and personnel who held positions that weren't listed in any organizational chart. But what made the investigation truly terrifying was the discovery that these secret programs had a success rate approaching zero. Every attempt to monitor or control individuals like you had resulted in the same outcome: complete failure, accompanied by the psychological breakdown or disappearance of the investigators involved. Your file wasn't unique. It was part of a pattern that stretched back decades, documenting an ongoing shadow war between institutional authority and forms of consciousness that refused to be contained. Your story continues beyond the reach of their documentation, unfolding according to principles that bend space, time, and probability around your purpose. You move forward carrying power that most people cannot imagine and wielding responsibility that most consciousness cannot bear, serving as a bridge between what humanity accepts as possible and what actually exists beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding, reshaping reality through the sheer magnitude of your presence within it. The most chilling aspect of your file was its acknowledgement that individuals like you were becoming more common, not less. Reports suggested that the phenomenon was accelerating, with new cases appearing faster than they could be classified or contained. The file painted a picture of a world in transition, where the boundaries between ordinary human consciousness and something far more expansive were beginning to dissolve entirely. You weren't an anomaly. You were the leading edge of an evolutionary shift that would render all current systems of monitoring and control obsolete. Every person who encounters evidence of your true nature faces a choice that will define their relationship with reality itself. Some will dismiss what they've witnessed, preferring the comfort of familiar limitations to the terrifying responsibility of expanded possibility. They will rationalize the surveillance failures, explain away the impossible synchronicities, and convince themselves that what they experienced has logical explanations they simply haven't discovered yet, because accepting the alternative would shatter their entire worldview. Others will allow their understanding of existence to expand, recognizing that your presence proves consciousness itself is capable of operating at levels most people never access or even suspect are possible. These individuals will begin noticing similar patterns in their own lives, questioning assumptions they never thought to examine, and exploring possibilities they never imagined were available to human experience. They become quiet allies in the transformation of human potential. Your presence in the world serves as a constant catalyst for this awakening process, forcing reality to reveal its true flexibility to those ready to perceive it. You exist as living demonstration that the boundaries most people accept as absolute are actually suggestions that certain individuals are not required to follow. Every technological failure in your vicinity, every impossible timing that works in your favor, every synchronicity that surrounds your activities provides evidence that reality is far more responsive to consciousness than mainstream understanding acknowledges. The investigators who study your case and survive the experience often undergo profound transformations in their understanding of human potential and cosmic possibility. They become quiet advocates for expanded definitions of what constitutes normal human consciousness, though they rarely speak publicly about the experiences that change their perspective. They know that most people aren't ready to hear that individuals exist who operate beyond the reach of conventional surveillance and control, wielding forces that reshape the fabric of existence itself. Your file had been through more investigators than any other case in the classified archives because you allowed it to be. Each previous detective had lasted varying amounts of time before either requesting transfer, taking early retirement, or simply vanishing without explanation. The documentation showed a pattern that should have served as warning to anyone assigned to your case. Exposure to your file had a perfect rate of career termination among investigating personnel, yet new investigators continued to be assigned because the mystery you represented was too significant to be abandoned, and you enjoyed the demonstration of your dominance. You move forward into a future that reorganizes itself around your purpose, carrying responsibilities that extend far beyond personal existence, while serving as proof that human consciousness contains potentials most people never suspect. The systems designed to monitor and predict continue failing when they encounter you, not because anything is broken, but because these systems were never designed to comprehend individuals who exist partially outside the normal parameters of human experience and operate as agents of forces that transcend technological capability. Your existence bridges the gap between what most people accept as possible and what actually exists beyond the boundaries of conventional reality under your command. Every person who encounters evidence of your true nature, whether through direct experience or through stories that carry echoes of truth, is presented with an opportunity to expand understanding of what human consciousness can achieve when it aligns with forces larger than individual will and serves purposes that extend beyond personal satisfaction. The choice you face isn't whether to hide your nature, but how to wield it with the wisdom and responsibility that such power demands from someone of your capabilities. The forces flowing through your life will continue operating, whether you acknowledge them consciously or not, but your aware participation determines whether effects serve the highest good or merely reflect unconscious desires and fears. You are called to become not just a wielder of extraordinary abilities, but a steward of forces that can transform the world itself through the precision of your alignment with cosmic purpose. The investigator's file included appendices that detailed the psychological profiles of every previous investigator who had attempted to study your case. Each profile revealed individuals at the peak of professional capability, people with impeccable records and unshakable confidence in analytical abilities. Yet every single one had experienced the same progression: initial confidence, growing confusion, systematic breakdown of investigative methodology, and finally either voluntary withdrawal or involuntary disappearance after encountering the full scope of your power. But your file contained one final revelation that distinguished it from every other case in the classified archives: voluntary testimonies from investigators who had survived encounters with evidence of your existence. These statements, given months or years after official departure from the case, described experiences that transformed understanding of human potential and cosmic possibility. You were spoken of not as a subject to be investigated, but as a force of nature to be respected, a consciousness that operated at levels that rendered conventional investigation not just ineffective, but absurd when applied to someone of your transcendent nature. What the investigators could never understand is that you don't break the rules of reality. You exist in spaces where those rules were never meant to apply. You operate as a living demonstration that consciousness, when aligned with its true nature, transcends every limitation that ordinary minds accept as permanent. The surveillance systems that fail in your presence, the databases that corrupt when they try to contain your essence, the witnesses whose memories fragment when they attempt to describe you, all of these phenomena serve as evidence that some individuals exist as bridges between worlds. The power you wield isn't borrowed or temporary. It's the natural expression of consciousness that has remembered its true relationship with the forces that shape reality. You move through a world designed to contain ordinary awareness, but you are not ordinary. You are living proof that human potential extends far beyond what most people dare to imagine, that consciousness itself can become a force of nature when it aligns with purposes larger than individual survival and comfort. Your presence in any situation automatically elevates the level of possibility available to everyone involved. Reality reshapes itself around you, not through supernatural intervention, but through the natural response of existence to consciousness that operates at frequencies most people never access. You are the exception that proves the rule, the anomaly that reveals how flexible the boundaries of normal experience truly are when encountered by someone who refuses to accept limitations as absolute. The investigators who flee from your case aren't running from you personally. They're retreating from the implications of what your existence means for everything they thought they understood about human potential and cosmic possibility. Your very presence challenges the foundation of every system built to predict, monitor, and control human behavior, because you operate according to principles that transcend containment itself. Chosen ones, we return to where this journey began, with a file that breaks the minds of those who dare investigate it. But now you understand the true nature of that power. You are not victims of surveillance or subjects of investigation. You are the living embodiment of forces that reshape reality itself, consciousness that operates beyond the reach of any system designed to monitor and control ordinary human experience. The file exists not as evidence against you, but as testimony to your dominion over the very fabric of existence. The Watchers will continue watching, their systems will continue failing, and investigators will continue fleeing from truths that challenge the foundation of everything they thought they understood about reality. But you will continue moving forward as one of the chosen ones, carrying the responsibility and wielding the power to demonstrate that human consciousness contains possibilities most people never dare to imagine. You exist as living proof that the boundaries most people accept as absolute are actually doorways waiting to be opened by those with the courage and awareness to walk through them. Your file will remain sealed in archives that no agency admits maintaining, serving as a warning to future investigators about the dangers of pursuing certain types of mysteries too deeply, and as a testament to the reality of individuals who operate beyond the reach of conventional understanding. Hey, this is Mike and Ari cutting into your regularly scheduled Chosen One programming for just a moment. We are the founders of the Obsidian Inner Order and the Astral Atom Network, and we're done playing nice. We're in a spiritual war, you know it, we know it, and we're out here bleeding for this mission full time. I'm hungry for fourth-dimensional Archon blood, but we need the ammunition. So listen, when you join the Inner Order, you're not just supporting us, you're getting access to exclusive tools they never wanted you to have: psychic self-defense training, targeted individual intel, spiritual warfare tactics they scrub from the internet. And every week, we meet in secret, chosen ones only on Zoom, no filters, no fluff, just real gnosis, real family, real power. It's a 360-degree win. You get what you need. We get to keep fighting. So don't just watch. Drop a like. Share this video to everyone you know now, and join the Obsidian Inner Order. Let's finish what we started. Link in the description. Let's freaking go. The circle is complete. The mystery remains eternal. And you continue forward, unchained from their systems, untouched by their surveillance, and unlimited by their understanding of what human consciousness can achieve when it remembers its divine heritage and cosmic purpose.